I thought I saw a Scott earlier, but maybe I'm wrong.
It's a Scott Baker. Well, we'll go.
Yes, Barry, there is a Scott Baker on the phone.
Excuse me?
There is a Scott Baker here.
Yeah.
I think that's a different person.
Yeah, it's Scott Williamson.
Oh, Williamson, I'm sorry. Maybe we should just give everybody another minute or so.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, there's AXA. Yes, I see. AXA is here.
Okay. Aska, I think.
And Trisha, you may need to either speak a little bit more loudly, or your mic may be a little big, maybe covered or something.
I'm sorry. Is that at all better?
I think so.
Yes.
I apologize. I've been having this problem. Barry, if it's 6:30, so do you mind if we just jump right in?
Please do.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to see you all virtually again. My name is Trisha Shimamura, and I am co-chair of the Parks and Waterfront Committee, along with my other half, maybe right next to, in the square next to me.
Barry Schneider. Thank you.
So we're going to jump right into the agenda tonight. And I believe the first item is a presentation from ASCA.
From the City Planning Commission on the zoning for coastal flood resiliency.
Oh, great. And I see also Scott Williamson here.
Oh, there we go. Scott, good afternoon. Good evening, Scott.
Hey there. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah. Tricia, just one point. This is listed on the agenda as a joint meeting with Housing and Zoning and Development Committee. I don't know any of those members are here, but we will acknowledge them that that's part of they're co-hosting, co-chairing this meeting.
I saw Elizabeth Ashby is here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott. It's all yours.
Oh, and Scott, if you mute yourself, you will not be able to unmute yourself. Actually, it's a great segue just for everybody. If it's your first time at one of our Zoom community board meetings, everybody is muted. You are not able to unmute yourself. The way that you will be called on is by using the participants menu at the bottom of your screen. You click the button that says participants, a box will pop up, and you'll use the raise hand button to be recognized by Trisha and Barry as we move through the meeting. And there is a chat box. It is only to chat me about technical problems about the software. But if you have any problems, do feel free to chat. Scott, sorry.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, sorry, I did mute myself there, not knowing I couldn't undo that. So thanks for that. I will also need to share my screen in a second, which I see Zoom is going to stop me from doing. So if you don't mind, in a second or two, that'd be great.
You're good to go whenever.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us again. My name is Scott Williamson. I'm the East Side team leader at City Planning. I believe one of my colleagues is with me as well. Her name is Azka Mahuyudin. And I don't know if she'll be presenting much tonight, but she may be available for some questions as well if she's on the line. But I think it's just the two of us here tonight. And the main reason we're here is to talk to you about a project that City Planning's been working on for years in different iterations, particularly since Sandy happened, and it's called Zoning for Coastal Resiliency. Now, you may accidentally hear me refer to that as ZCFR throughout the presentation, and that's because I have a script that our resiliency planner experts have written for us. So apologies in advance if I do revert to the acronym there, but just so you know, it is referring to Zoning for Coastal Resiliency. So there's that. So I'm going to run through this presentation. And I mean, if you want to save any questions for us till the end of the presentation, that'd be much appreciated, because I mean, hopefully the presentation answers as much as possible for you. And I guess I probably do want to just underscore as well that Ozka and myself are not specifically resiliency planners in that sense. So we are typically liaisons with the community board. So we will try to explain this to you the best we can. But I mean, if you have a question that we can't answer, then we're certainly happy to try and follow it up after this for you if it is of a more technical nature, because a lot of this stuff is very detailed and has a lot of technical background to it. So yes, just so you know what we're getting into here. So if you'll bear with me a second, I'm just going to try and share my screen very quickly. Okay, can you see the presentation there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So zoning for coastal resilience, for coastal flood. Sorry, was someone saying something there? No?
No.
Zoning for coastal flood resiliency proposes updates to the zoning resolution, specifically in Chapter 6, specifically of Article 6, Chapter 4, and some other related sections. And it's driven mainly because various different mechanisms have been introduced to improve resiliency in, particularly in buildings since Sandy happened. And many of those expire in the coming years. So the department is trying to be as proactive as possible in implementing some more permanent type solutions. Now, I would mention as well that this is a small portion of the city's greater plan called 1 NYC. So there is various other different, resiliency type measures that are being taken across the city. You may know of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, which is a specific engineering, coastal resiliency exercise in Community Board 3 and Community Board 6, just to the south of you. So that's a different piece of it as an example. But this is dealing primarily with, zoning mechanisms for private property to enable, improved resiliency as, flooding potentially continues to increase in occurrence. But effectively, the proposal is seeking to modify and improve the previous provisions that we're expecting to expire in the coming years. And it's doing so through a text amendment to the Article 6 of Chapter 4 that I mentioned in the zoning resolution. And that part of the zoning resolution is called special regulations applying in flood hazard areas. So, I mean, the different solutions that this project proposes affects various different parts of the zoning resolution as well. And the way this presentation categorizes it is into the different goals that each set of those parts of the text amendment are trying to achieve. So I hope that they've sort of done that in as much of a user-friendly way as possible. But I mean, if there's a takeaway piece of this, it is that the changes that we're talking about here, they affect those properties that are in the 1% annual chance floodplain. So we're talking about specific sites that are very close to the coastline. And obviously Community Board 8 has quite a bit of that. Roosevelt Island is quite a bit of that. And I'll show you a map with that in a second. But part of this proposal as well is the department is expanding those provisions, which previously, they applied to the 1% annual chance floodplain. They will now be increased to apply to the 0.2 annual chance floodplain. So that is trying to future-proof the mechanisms that we have in place in the zoning, to the best extent that the department can at this point. So on to the next slide, you'll see here a series of maps. And while there are many sources of flooding that pose issues in New York City, coastal storms present the most significant flood risk in terms of compromising human safety, property damage, and business disruption. When we're analyzing the city's coastal risk, we focus on the area that FEMA designates as the high-risk flood zone. And as I mentioned to you just previously, the area that has a 1% chance of risk of being flooded every year. However, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy awakened us to more widespread flooding that went well beyond the 1% area. Close to half of the properties that are technically classified as being moderate risk of flooding or having 0.2% chance of flooding were inundated as well. And with climate change, the floodplain will continue to expand. By the 2050s, today's moderate risk flood zone will likely be a high risk flood zone. And the area that today is becoming home to almost 1 million New Yorkers. So some widespread implications of this, particularly for where a lot of our city currently lives. So I think in anticipating a logical question out of this slide that you're looking at here, I suspect a lot of you might want to know how exactly this applies to Community Board 8, and I do have another map for you that I can show you that on right now. I just want to try and switch over it for a second, if you bear with me really quickly. Okay, so here is a special map that they put together for you. Let me know if you can't see it. But this is the specific Community Board 8 geography and how it applies. So on the left, you can see that the existing rules we have for resiliency that are in the zoning resolution that have been done in the years following Sandy in 2012, you can see in yellow there, and that relates to the 1% chance floodplain in Community Board 8. So you can see that's a majority of Roosevelt Island, and there's some portions to the south along the East River in Community Board 8, as well as up towards East Harlem along the East River as well. So that was what exists today, and those are the rules that are potentially expiring soon, and that the department is proposing to update. So the material difference between what exists in the applicability of today and effectively what is being proposed, you can see in red there. So you can see some additional parts of Roosevelt Island, which pretty much captures the whole island from that point. There's some sites down in the south of Community Board 8 and some additional sites further up to the north. And the red, again, I would highlight, represents what the department is proposing to expand our resiliency measures to include the 0.2% floodplain. So that's 0.2% chance of flooding every year from coastal inundation. And happy to make these materials available to you as well after the meeting, probably I assume through Will. So I'm just going to switch back to my PowerPoint now. Okay, so now that we've sorted out geography, just to give you some more summary here, this proposal builds on 2 zoning text amendments that were put in place shortly after Hurricane Sandy to help coastal neighborhoods recover and rebuild quickly. And I had alluded to those 2 zoning text amendments just before. But those zoning flexibilities, which were passed as temporary emergency measures, are beginning to expire. The Department of City Planning has conducted years of research and outreach, which uncovered many issues that communities are still facing. The proposal now is to make many of those provisions added after Sandy permanent, to expand so the communities have even greater flexibility for adaptation. Ultimately, zoning for coastal flood resiliency will help those living and working in the floodplain to do a number of things, including reduce damage from future coastal storms, be resilient in the long term by accounting for future risks from including climate change, and potentially help save on flood insurance costs. It would also assist with disaster recovery from future disasters, including the present situation with COVID. So, I mean, if I can give you a main summary of what this project is seeking to achieve, it's probably this slide. And again, we'll make sure it's available to you afterwards. But there's sort of 4 goals or pillars that this project is seeking to make changes to the zoning resolution based off of. So I guess just to go into the depths of that, after a long process of studying the floodplain and engaging with more than 3,000 New Yorkers on a wide set of issues, we were able to establish these 4 overarching goals that help us move from Sandy recovery to a longer-term resiliency strategy. So we know that firstly, the floodplain community wants to be able to prepare buildings for flooding, even if they are not located in what FEMA determines to be the current high-risk flood zone. especially those located in the areas that face moderate risk of flooding and that did experience coastal flooding from Sandy. Secondly, people also want the option to raise their occupiable space a little higher than the current flood level that FEMA projects. Again, this is because they have seen higher flood levels and expect that risk to grow in future. When people are undertaking big investments to retrofit the buildings that they live in, they only want to do that once, understandably. So related to that investment that one has to pursue in fully retrofitting to resiliency standards, the third point is important here. So residents and business owners are seeking options to invest in resiliency incrementally in some circumstances so that it's more affordable. They want options like moving their mechanical equipment to higher elevations without necessarily triggering a requirement to raise or fully flood-proof the entire structure, which you can understand gets quite costly. So the fourth goal is after undertaking 2 zoning updates for resiliency, we know that we need a way for the city to be nimbler in responding to future events that might require rebuilding homes or other forms of recovery. So specifically, the next slides sort of go through those 4 goals a little more in detail. So bear with me on some of that detail. Anyhow, firstly, starting with goal 1, this speaks to the text applicability of the proposed regulations. It is important to note that these regulations are optional and they would be facilitating buildings to meet or even exceed flood resistance construction standards that have been set by FEMA and enforced by the city's building code. And that part of the building code is known as Appendix G, if anyone has specific familiarity with it. Zoning for coastal resiliency would expand the applicability of the current text to a broader set of buildings that are also exposed to flooding in the event of coastal storms by allowing any lot located within both the 1% and the 0.2% annual chance floodplains to have access to the proposed special rules that help enable resiliency at the building scale. The 0.2% chance floodplain serves as a proxy for the high-end projection of the 2050s, 1% annual chance floodplain, allowing the city to advance resiliency in the longer term, as it would allow those living in those areas to proactively undertake resiliency improvements, even if they're not yet required to by the building code. So regarding goal 2, this section illustrates regulations that would be available only if the building fully complies with the flood regulations of the building code in Appendix G and is split into 5 separate subcategories. Starting with building envelope, these sets of rules would allow buildings to physically elevate habitable spaces and other building support features above expected flood elevations by offering more flexibility with bulk regulations, including height, rear yards, floor area, so that buildings can be made resilient without putting homeowners in a hard spot of potentially having to choose between keeping their whole building versus making their homes resilient. Regarding ground floor regulations, this set of rules would help promote good long-term resilient design of buildings and how they meet the sidewalk. Through floor area exemptions, the proposed rules would encourage internal access and active uses to be kept at the sidewalk level as much as is possible for floodplain communities to continue to be vibrant and accessible. As a reminder, all of these allowances can only be used if buildings fully meet Appendix G to ensure that buildings meet the full resiliency standards. In addition to that, to ensure resilient buildings contribute to their surroundings, we would also mandate that a set of streetscape requirements are met so that the ground floor level design of resilient buildings is also improved. Now moving on to speaking about situations where neighborhoods and buildings may be old and maybe they don't fully comply with our current zoning regulations, leaving residents, and in those instances, it leaves residents in these areas in a hard position when they try and undertake any resiliency improvements. An example of that are homes that are currently located on substandard lots, which may not comply with floor area or yard regulations at present. The proposal would set up a framework that would allow these and many other situations in which buildings do not conform with our use regulations or do not comply with bulk regulations to be able to be retrofitted without bumping into zoning constraints. So last, and with such vast and diverse building stock and conduction within the floodplain, we recognize that all buildings, not all buildings in all situations would be helped by the as of right rules. Therefore, the proposal would continue to offer discretionary pathways in the form of BSA special permits to ensure that all unique situations are enabled to meet the standards for construction within the floodplain. So moving on to goal 3 now. The set of provisions located within these 4 categories are what we call partial resiliency strategies, as they assist buildings undertaking incremental steps towards resiliency without requiring the structure or sites to meet the full set of rules within Appendix G of the building code. We learned that raising mechanical equipment is often the first step to make buildings more resilient. And so the proposal would enable more options for the placement of equipment above flood level, either atop of roofs, which is a common strategy for larger buildings, or in a separate structure, which is a common strategy for large sites or smaller buildings that cannot accommodate the added heavy load of equipment within their building or on the roof of the building. So a big portion of the floodplain contains businesses that offer either neighborhood services or that are part of the large industrial economy of the city. Many such businesses cannot really be completely elevated or dry-proofed and may therefore need to prioritize what kinds of spaces they would raise out of harm's way of flooding. So such spaces can offer the necessary support immediately after a storm event and reduce business disruption. The proposal would also enable different buildings of flood protection. The proposal would also enable different types of flood protection measures to be implemented across all areas in the floodplain. This would include allowances for flood panels and landscaped berms, and their associated egress systems to be considered permitted obstructions within open areas. It would also allow spaces used for the storage of panels to be exempted from floor area to enable on-site storage. Lastly, in many areas of the city, zoning requires waterfront sites to provide waterfront access, and in a wider range of sites at the water's edge, the grade of such waterfront yard or required visual corridor cannot be modified. The proposal would continue to offer flexibility for grading to occur and facilitate other resiliency measures, such as soft shorelines, to be designed to help account for sea level rise. So now for goal 4, which is the last of the goals that make up the project. This applies differently from the previous regulations, providing rules that would mostly apply on the city-wide scale. So Hurricane Sandy showed us how a storm's effects can go beyond the floodplain, especially across our energy grid. The proposal would allow power systems, including generators and solar energy systems, fuel cells, batteries, and other energy storage systems to be considered permitted obstructions in open areas across all zoning districts to facilitate their installment. In addition, to ensure all areas of the city can easily provide ADA access, the proposal would classify both ramps and lifts as permitted obstructions in all required open areas to facilitate accessible designs. Another important issue is how disasters, especially those that require the evacuation of residents, impact vulnerable populations. Nursing homes have populations that require continual medical care, and research shows that this dependency can be strained whether nursing homes shelter in place or evacuate prior to a coastal storm. Therefore, the city believes it would be appropriate to limit the growth of nursing homes in high-risk areas to loosen the health consequences and logistical challenges of evacuating residents of these facilities. The proposal would prohibit the development of new nursing homes within the high risk, and that's the 1% chance floodplain, and other selected geographies that would have limited vehicular access during a storm event. Existing facilities in those areas would still be able to conduct enlargements for modest improvements, including those that help with resiliency. Lastly, Sandy also showed us that a lengthy process to update zoning regulations can present obstacles to the necessarily fast-paced disaster response. The proposal would include rules that could be made available to facilitate the recovery process from future disasters, some of which would be implemented now to help address the COVID pandemic and its associated economic effects. The first one would be to give property owners who hold special permits and authorizations an additional term so that they can complete their original plan for construction on a longer timeline. The second would be support businesses that do not conform with zoning regulations by allowing them more than 2 years, the current limit of discontinuance, to return to operation. In terms of next steps, the citywide text amendment that we're presenting to you today is being referred out to all community boards, borough presidents, and to the city council in the land use process. Community boards are being asked to submit recommendations to the City Planning Commission, and those are asked for by December 28. More information about the project, including an annotated version of the proposed zoning text, can be found on DCP's website. And I'll also note there's a lot of information that has been part of the referral package that I believe Will has put on the community board website as well. So thank you for the time for this update, and happy to try and take any questions that you might have.
Scott, thank you very much. And before we get to questions, I do want to remind you, as we discussed earlier, that at this meeting this evening, there'll be no resolution coming forth. However, we will have a further discussion at the Land Use Committee meeting on December 3rd. And at that time, a resolution, if we so desire, will be produced. We would like to be sure that you have a staff member on hand at that meeting so they can be prepared to answer any questions that may come up at that meeting. Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's December 9th, not
December 9th, you say, Will?
Yes, December
Yes.
9th.
Yeah, that's the date I have, yes. Okay. Trish, you want to start with asking the members of the public for questions? I see we have one member of the public. You want to introduce that member, please?
Sure. Wendy McIver, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Scott, what a really pretty presentation. Thank you for coming to CB8 with this. I am a resident of CB8, and I noticed that most of the pictures have nothing to do with us in terms of our buildings, our structure, our architecture. So I'm very sympathetic with people in those really lovely single family homes. And I am very well aware of the coastal influences, for example, in North Carolina, where buildings have had to have been placed on stilts as a remediation for regular flooding, seasonal flooding, and that is, certainly a solution. But there's an enormous problem with cutting zoning review time. That's a very hard one process that voters have put in place because we feel bulldozed by developers who just want to go for a race to the sky. And the height of buildings themselves causes the global warming that facilitates all of this flooding. And we know for a fact that above, the 210 height cap that's, available in many areas of the city, that buildings above that level put out an exponential amount of greenhouse gases that cause just this kind of sea rise and flooding. And yet we're talking about placing mechanicals above ground, which may be absolutely a wonderful idea in terms of being able to keep buildings functional, but it does not mean that buildings should be going above that level. That should simply be incorporated into that height level. And I'm wondering how it is you are reflecting that. It's a beautiful presentation, especially for other parts of the city, but I don't see how it relates to you showed a map of our zone, and I was very encouraged, but not one picture showed our buildings, our construction. We are built on granite. We're not a sandy shore. We have different geophysical problems, and I'm wondering if you can rejigger your presentation and come back and talk to us about us.
So I don't have a specific presentation that takes into just Community Board 8. This presentation has been done to apply to the 59 community boards across the city. So as you can see, and as you highlight, there is some community boards that have a huge amount of implication out of this. I mean, as far as how the concepts apply to Community Board 8, I would suggest they're the same where there is that type of development. So say for instance, the differences in streetscape requirements and things that are being proposed, ADA requirements, the ability to relocate mechanicals and things like that, those are all largely enabled today as part of the previous text amendments that went through after Hurricane Sandy. The proposal at the moment is to increase it to the area that you saw in red on the map that I pulled up in Community Board 8. And really, it's not doing a great deal beyond that. So, I mean,
we had significant flooding. Please forgive me. We had significant flooding during Superstorm Sandy. I was here. I saw the FDR Drive become a kayaking lane. People were actually kayaking. So we are quite vulnerable, and I very much respect engineering expertise. But you gave a wonderful presentation for areas, for example, with a topography that is sandy or right adjacent to a beach. Seashore in that sense. We are not that. And when you look at our map, we had significant flooding in 96th Street that impeded patient access to Metropolitan Hospital. We know that downtown, of course, the Veterans Administration Hospital was affected and had to be evacuated, as well as parts of NYU. These are absolutely, you are completely right, significant issues, but I didn't see a presentation that talked about that. And when you're talking about relocating mechanicals, I am all for that. Then you talked about permitting extra height. That is not okay. That part is not okay. That's something that voters do not think is okay, and is in fact not okay in terms of environmental considerations that directly affect the flooding. So I'm wondering if you can actually readdress that. I appreciate that there are so many districts in New York and that we have a very diverse topography, even though 4 of the 5 of our boroughs are islands and 1 is a peninsula, also very much affected by the tides of the Atlantic Ocean. But this did not address us.
Wendy, we don't like to have this back and forth. Please confine your remarks to the presentation.
I will stop, and I think you all have enough material to be able to continue if you are also curious.
Thank you.
If I can address the height component of that, I mean, within the yellow area at the moment, a building that is within the floodplain can increase its height based upon its likelihood of flooding and the necessity for them to elevate to comply with, firstly, the building code, which is the base requirement of all buildings. So the extent to which they can increase height is not to an excessive standard. It at most is about 10 feet, and it allows them to measure their height instead of from the ground level, which would be susceptible to flooding. They measure their height from what is the design flood elevation. So that effectively puts their ground floor and measures above that at the maximum flood elevation. So the extent of increase in height, as I said, is largely available to those properties in yellow today. It's proposed to be increased to the ones in red as part of this proposal to reflect the 0.2 floodplain. But I mean, as far as how much that increase would materially be, I would not suggest it's a huge amount, but I'll leave that up to the discretion of how the board views that.
We have Elaine Walsh, Margaret Tamayo, Michelle Birnbaum, and Lowell Barton. Please try to keep your questions to Scott for 2 minutes or less. Thank you.
Thank you for can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation, but I am very upset about the presentation. CPC has chosen not to do a presentation to our community board. We saw this presentation many years ago that went to the other boroughs. We need to see, and I'm asking that when they come December 9th to do a presentation, particularly to CB8. Mechanicals have been an issue, and new buildings being built have put them higher. However, what you did not address is that although nursing homes must now not be permitted to build in these areas. Our area is filled with hospitals along York Avenue, where the flooding does account. So I'm asking, because I'm very disappointed with the presentation. I thought tonight was CB8. I've seen this before. We've heard it before. You've given us no new information. And I ask that for December 9th meeting, if that's the correct date, that we not have, no insult to you, the community liaison, but somebody who can speak to the technicalities of what we're discussing. In our area, I'm aware of the low 60s. I'm aware of in the low 90s, the public housing that's been impacted, and definitely the FDR as well as Roosevelt Island. No one has come out to talk about what we need to build. As far as height, no, if the zoning is a certain level, you don't get extra to build. You knowingly purchase and build in an area where there are certain regulations. Into the basements, most weren't building and should never have put their mechanicals. We saw in Sandy what happened with all the hospitals and garages in the basement. So I'm asking now, because I'm very disappointed with this presentation from a zoning perspective, that CPC come back in December, and if you have a problem, reach out to us and we will move to get a presentation that talks about us. I agree with the previous speaker that I don't need to know about the private houses in the other boroughs and what they need to do to go up 9 feet to be above the zoning flood, which now you're telling us probably should be at 12 to 15, which will make ADA regulations impossible. But I must say, I'm disappointed. If you could identify tonight, which, I see it on the map, but which exactly areas are in contest and what you see these buildings, because we don't have private houses, can do to rectify their existence. Thank you.
Okay, would you unmute Marco, please?
Thank you. It was a beautiful presentation. It helped me a lot. This is my first time that I had to disclose who am I. I'm a licensed architect, okay? I'm a practitioner of all these regulations. This is what I'm very happy to learn. The second part is also I'm a certified female professional. So I understand. And is, yes, the first speaker went and hit the nail on the top, hit the hammer on the top. So my point is very simple. For instance, you have a building that you showed the nursery home. Then you said, you know, these buildings, we don't have in our case, but the building we have in our case, you said this building, it has to discontinue the use to a nursery home. Great. Now you said you gotta change the CO. When you change the CO, they apply the Appendix G. And the Appendix G, unless it is in compliance with the flooding zone, you cannot rebuild almost anything. You cannot change anything. And that may happen, the change of use in our buildings, in our community, because there are buildings, especially on the low 60s, that have these kind of problems. However, on the 96th Street, I studied deeper in those projects. Why? Because those projects, they never thought there's gonna be in a flood area. Now there is in a flood area. And my study showed that one of the biggest problems when the level of the water is coming at the level where, whatever you put it, 11 feet, that's the flood area in that area. It's not the water is coming from that part, but also it's coming from the bottom up. So those buildings become flooding from this, percolate inside of the building with the water. So you cannot do these kind of solutions. Yes, I appreciate that you go in the direction to look for solutions, great. But the problem is not only that, the building code, not only the flooding area is designed and is established like you propose, there is the design flooding elevation, which is 3 feet above of the flood area, which is higher what you are recommending. And this is absolutely right. The problem is unpractical how we're gonna approach in our community. I'm very happy for the other part because you train it even better for me. But in this case, we are in the community Ward 8. We have different kind of the typology of buildings, and we have to address in that direction. And I found that if you put barriers like you recommend, the water you think that is the water think that's coming just only from the river up. No, it's coming from the floor, underground up, because the water table increased the level inside of the buildings. So it's unpractical, especially for the existing buildings. For new construction, yes, you can apply, and this is beautiful, the regulation for new buildings, but not for existing buildings, because at any time, they can create serious structural damage. And not only that, they can break the sewer system, the electrical system, and any other system that is penetrate inside of the building. So these kind of solutions, you gotta find out how you're gonna propose to resolve that part. And I think it's completely wrong in that direction that you neglect to come and propose something for our community. For myself, I'm happy because I learn more in the other part, because I'm a practitioner in the architectural field. But the point is, in this case, is for our building I'm standing for right now. We need a solution for our building. And then is coming the other issue, which is the esplanade, and this is coming other kind of issues. You said the soft flooding zones. Yes, it's practical for other section of the community ward, or other community wards, I'm sorry. But for our community, we are almost flat with the river. We don't have a chance like on the Hudson area. You're allowed to come the river inside of the land, and then the water is kind of recede back. So in our community, we don't have that chance. We need to create a different solutions. And we have a problems in our esplanade that constantly collapse, and they will continue collapsing. And that is why I'm standing for in that direction. So I strongly recommend you prepare something which is going to be very hard to resolve in a short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Michelle?
Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for the presentation. A couple of points. Firstly, what I gleaned from this, and I support the comments of all the prior speakers, I feel the same way. But what I gleaned from this is, in reality, there really is no proposal for our area. I don't believe that you came to us with this general proposal just because this is what you have. If you had something more specific to CB8, I would imagine that you would have come to us with it. So my assumption is that, in fact, there is no proposal for the kind of topography that we have in CB8. So to the extent that you don't have a proposal, that of course is of concern. Let me address the height restrictions for the buildings. Something that, as you may or may not know, CB8 has been fighting for certain height restrictions because we have no zoning height limitations on First, Second, Third Avenue, etc. And a lot of building developers have been using the ability to put mechanicals in the middle of the buildings as a reason to increase the height very, very substantially. And they're not doing that specifically because of flooding, although because of the possibility of flooding, it's a good idea to put the mechanicals there. But what they're doing is putting it there so that they can increase their height where the residential portion and can afford themselves of the views, et cetera, and all the benefits of height. There have been some rules and regulations put in place that limit that extension based on whether or not there's an enclosure around those mid-level mechanicals. So number one, in your considering of what's appropriate for CB8, I would like to ask that in fact, in order to put mechanicals above grade level, that developers not be afforded any additional space over what is absolutely necessary for the mechanicals. Sometimes they need 8 feet, but the developer wants 20 feet. And secondly, that they're not considered as space, which then gets added as a bonus to the top of the building, because mechanicals are part of a building. So there's no reason to get an exemption because you're including mechanicals in your building. There's no reason to get a height, to get more height ability because you're including a necessary function of a functioning building. So that would be number one that I would ask you not to, I would ask you if there is a presentation coming for us, that would certainly be included and addressed. The other thing is what we do face in our area that you haven't addressed, and how would you propose to do it? And if you don't have a suggestion now, to please have it incorporated. We are loaded with buildings already built in our floodplain. They're already there. They're hospitals, they're nursing homes, they're residences, they're parks. There's the FDR Drive, which routinely floods at about 125th Street. And this has been true for as long as I'm alive. And I believe engineers have tried to address it and somehow couldn't. So that's a very vulnerable area. I don't see a plan here. But how do you propose that the existing buildings deal with this? How do you deal with their basements? What do you do with that which currently exists? So I'm asking you that if and when you come back to us, that you address the height statistics that I mentioned to you, how you propose to deal with our basements, and how you propose to deal with the FDR Drive. So thank you. And I hope that you will have that information when you get back. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michelle. And now Lowell Barton's last hand I see up. Lowell, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to everybody that there are a couple projects ongoing in our neighborhood where it is happening now. At the Isaac houses, they have raised all the mechanicals. They are building a building that was probably a open area or a parking lot, and they built up to raising the mechanicals, taking them out of the basement, and they're putting them up above the floodplain. So that's a type of, and what they're probably going to do, I believe, is build a flood wall around it, the property, which was also in their presentation. So they're doing like 2 of those components. Many other of the NYCHA buildings along the FDR Drive have done that. The Reese houses, the Baruch, and a lot of the private buildings, South Street, Wall Street, what they have done, I believe on one of the presentations, they showed how they have walls that will go around. Right now you can't see them, but in the sidewalk, they have a lot of structure there to put these flood walls around the building to protect the existing mechanicals that are in the basement. I haven't really seen anybody just put them on top of the roof out of the bottom yet. I don't know how they would have to support the roof or whatever, but the projects that I've seen that relate to this project have been flood walls and the raising of the mechanicals. And you can see that now on 96th Street, 93rd Street at the Isaac houses. That's it.
Thank you very much, Lowell.
You're
Tricia?
welcome.
I'll let Barbara go first.
Sure.
Just very quickly, I was going to say that Metropolitan Hospital is building the wall around just for that reason. It's FEMA money and the design, and they're building a wall, substantial wall to protect the hospital.
Okay, thank you.
I was really just going to say that I'm really actually glad that we saw this early and that everybody was able to comment on it. for Scott, I would have to agree, I think a lot, and I don't know how much flexibility you have with this, but I do think that if you're making this presentation to every community board across the city, I think it's very wise to think about the audiences for these, and particularly in those that are not built on sand but are built on granite, those who have more existing buildings, that have more multifamily kind of homes, and especially for us with the FDR Drive and the Esplanade and the hospitals, as Elaine said, I think that all of that does warrant just a slightly different focus. And so when you do come to the December 9th meeting, and I'm sorry, the baby's crying in the background, but when you do come to the December 9th meeting, I do think that makes a lot of sense. And I too would like to just see if we could get a little more focus, and if that's something that has to happen where we can provide with you, particularly as this committee focuses on the waterfront. So as if we can provide for you just some more information about our specific waterfront and how this zoning change would impact that waterfront, to get you to dial into more specifics on that, or whoever else is presenting to us on December 9th, I think that would be extremely helpful. So I'm glad to have had this, and I'm glad that our fellow board members and Wendy raised some of these issues, because I think that overall it's just gonna be a better and more productive conversation on December 9th if we can just kind of focus in on the information that is specific to our community.
I agree with Tricia. Scott, let's hear from you and some of the questions that were raised.
Where to start? Okay, so I mean, I probably initially should address something that I think perhaps has been lost in translation here, because I mean, for this to be specifically tailored to Community Board 8 would require FEMA to be issuing a specific flood regulation that applies to Community Board 8, and for the zoning resolution to only specifically apply to a part of Community Board 8. And the way this text amendment works is that it operates for the whole of the city in the same way. So FEMA issues flood level elevations that apply to the whole city. So it doesn't matter if you're on sand or on bedrock or what your built context is, that level is the same. So this is seeking to solve an issue on a citywide basis. And yes, you know, the Upper East Side and CB8 specifically has different built form contexts and a lot more older building stock than a lot of neighborhoods. And it doesn't have, you know, factories and small houses and things that were perhaps, you know, shown as examples in the presentation. But regardless of what the structure is, the building flood elevation plane that is being adopted here, it applies in the same way. The elevation of mechanicals and the ability to increase height applies in the same way as well. So, I mean, I will take all your comments back. I've been writing them down, and we'll consult with the resiliency team. We hadn't anticipated presenting again on August 9, and I'm not sure that was what was specifically offered. We welcome all of your comments, and they are welcomed as part of the exhibition of this, or sorry, the public review of this. August 9, we can certainly come back and try and answer some open questions, but I'm not sure we'll have a specific presentation for you, because this team is working on 59 community boards. So to tailor this specifically to every single one of them, it would be very difficult for them. So, I mean, I don't want to get your hopes up in that regard, but certainly your comments will be communicated back. The point I have here is on infrastructure, such as the FDR and hospitals and things. You'll remember at the start of the presentation, I had outlined that One NYC is the citywide plan for resiliency. So there is numerous different components in that. Some of it is the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. Some of it is protecting infrastructure and different specific projects. This one is a very narrow look at private building stock and how barriers can be removed for private building owners to either incrementally or at once improve the resiliency of their buildings specifically. Hospitals completely separate of this, the FDR completely separate of this, and infrastructure in general for that matter. So, I mean, I hope that clarifies some of that question. But again, we'll take your comments back. And I mean, if they continue to be something that you think is relevant, then again, we welcome them in the comments that you send back to the public review of this project. Something else that was raised there was the possibility of developers using mechanicals to their advantage to get extra height. Many of you will be familiar with a text amendment that the city did also, I believe it was early last year, relating to mechanical void spaces. And this does not supersede that. Developers won't suddenly be able to circumvent the action that the city took last year to start trying to increase the height of their buildings artificially again due to mechanical space. They still have to justify the areas they're using as mechanical, and when they get above a certain threshold, it automatically counts as floor area. That's the way that the voids text amendment worked, and it's proposed to continue in that regard as well. I mean, there's a number of different points there, and again, happy to communicate them back to the project team on this and try and give you some appropriate answers, but also welcome your comments in the recommendation you have ultimately to this project.
By the way, Scott, you kept referring to August 9th. We really had in mind December 9th.
Yes, sorry, that was definitely what I meant.
Okay,
I guess I'm
fair
still
enough.
living in summer.
Don't we wish we all? I see Elaine Walsh is back with a question. Marco and Tamayo. And Michelle, I'm sorry.
Scott.
Elaine, let's go.
Okay, Scott, I appreciate what you just said, but it is an insult. We are volunteers on a CB8. We give lots of time, and you're telling us your staff don't have time to zero in to a particular presentation to a community board. Your responsibility is to present a presentation to CB8. What the questions are that were raised, you've not answered. We do not, as a zoning committee co-chair, accept the broad presentation you just gave. We expect on December 9th that you come in with the impact on CB8. If you cannot, then suspend your timetable and come to us in January. I have spent, as my co-chair and many others on the board, looking at this issue. I was familiar, absolutely, with after Sandy, but what you've added is zero. And I have to say, personally, I'm insulted having to sat through your presentation of a generic plan for the city. Each community is different. You need to come in with a presentation for each community. We don't have rise the floor so the water flows underneath the building. We have serious issues in our community with institutions, with housing, with parking, etc., on that area. And I have to say, sitting through this, I am so insulted by your not being prepared. You're the community liaison. I don't want to hear this again. I want to hear from somebody who can respond and tell us the options. If not, I will recommend we disapprove. Not that we can, but I am really, really insulted by your presentation and dealing with other boroughs and not coming in with what the challenges are for our community and how far up the avenues we go on this. It looks like York and East End maybe first. We need to see that from you, or your plan is worth nothing. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm angry, and I'm furious.
I see a hand we haven't seen before. Craig later. Will you unmute Craig, please? And then I'm going to Tricia, please, after Craig.
Hi, good evening. I just want to thank you for the presentation. As someone who lives in a building where we were evacuated in the height of Sandy and displaced for almost 2 weeks, I very much appreciate the effort that the city has gone through, and DCP especially, to ensure that that neighborhoods and communities and residents who live in vulnerable areas are going to have the ability to be able to harden their homes and their buildings, and to be able to deal with the inevitable threats of climate change and sea level rise and flooding threats that are going to continue. I understand as an urban planner how difficult this is to come up with something that can accommodate the entire city. So I just want to extend my appreciation for the work that you did, and to let you know that there are some of us who are not insulted by your presentation and who think that this is a very thorough job, and the impact on our community in many respects, and I say this as someone who was affected by Sandy severely, is going to be very minimal compared to much of the rest of the city, where you have tens of thousands of people who are going to really be able to benefit from this. So I just wanted to put that out there and provide those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
Appreciate
Tricia.
that. Thank you.
I just again, Scott, I guess maybe I was misunderstood. I think that specifically it's not as much the data as it is the presentation piece to this of what to focus on the next time that this is brought up. I think that there are a lot of questions have been raised around and specifically since this is Parks and Waterfront, I'll talk about the Esplanade, which you mentioned in your presentation, but it wasn't like, it really didn't, I was having a hard time better understanding of like how that translates to the Esplanade and how that translates for my community. And then specifically with like the mechanical voids piece and that sort of thing, just to, if there can be additional clarity on what that really means for these existing buildings and what that really means for the type of properties that are in our neighborhood. So it's really just a better, just making it more applicable to even though I understand that the zoning is for the entire city, it's really better understanding how it's applicable to our community is where I'm getting at. And again, like I'm more than happy to send you some of the, I've been writing down these questions too, but more than happy to send you like how those specifically how that like those pieces that I think that a lot of folks are kind of raising in terms of just better understanding what this really means for us.
Sure.
Thank you, Tricia.
Certainly noted on the voids there. We could certainly, if you have specific questions on that, that's where this really sort of gets quite technical. So if you have specific questions about that, please feel free to communicate them back to us. I mean, all I can say about the Esplanade is it's a piece of infrastructure that the city maintains. This text amendment doesn't do anything to address that. That's a different part of the One NYC project. But that's the extent of what I can elaborate on that.
Thank you, Scott. Marco, this is your second bite of the apple. Please make it brief.
Thank you so much. I'm going to raise the issue when you said that the zoning resolution has to be general. First of all, let me put one thing to you. You're in the hot seat. It's not against you, please. It's because we want to have solutions for our neighborhood. We love our neighborhood and we fight for our neighborhood. What I'm trying to say is we are pushing to you to do the right thing for our neighborhood. That's it. Don't take personal, please. Now, when you refer about the low and high density and you make unique for the whole city, of course, when you read the zoning resolution, you put it, this resolution is for R1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you put for high density, 7, 8, R7, 8, 9, 10. So you put in general terms. So therefore, you have to cover your solutions has to be very careful crafted. Otherwise, I think is a failure that's going to happen right here. Now, let me address something very important. You just hear what a fellow community member mentioned that they put the mechanicals in the NYCHA developments. You know, I don't know if you pass over there. They were doing the boring test like they're building a 100-story building. You know why? Because they are fully aware that the water is not coming from the river, it's coming from underground. And when it's coming underground, it's going to damage seriously the foundation that you'd never see, and nobody see that part. And this is why the structural engineer probably, rather myself, I will put it on the top of the buildings. because it makes it easier. No, these people, they decide to use the open space. They misuse, they neglect to use the open space, which basically is wrong. We have that affected the quality of affordable housing in our community. But that is another discussion. I don't want to go in that direction. The point is, if you want to put, I hear also a wall around the building, that is a joke. You know what? Because water, they always go for the weakest part, never go for the hardest part. So if you put a wall in front of a building, the water go around the building and stop. So my point is, you gotta think carefully what are you proposing, especially for our community. For the other communities, I applaud, I agree, and thank you so much for training a little bit more. I appreciate that part. But for our community, I don't see that you actually present something. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. And Michelle has the last word before we move on.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott, for addressing the height and the mechanicals. Let me ask you something. Let's take Craig's building, the one he just described, that actually was affected and he had to be evacuated. An existing building that exists in the floodplain, a multi-story, multi-occupant building. Can you tell me how that building and the others like it, how do they address their position in the floodplain?
So, I mean, I don't know the building you're specifically talking about, but I mean,
It's generic. It's a generic building. He described a residential existing building. Let's presume that that and others are in the floodplain. They exist. They're already built. People are living there. How do you suggest, how does the agency suggest a building such as that protect themselves in case of a hurricane? What do they do? We heard about building walls around it. We heard that water goes around walls. Water it's flexible. It always finds a path. We heard that water comes up from underneath the building. So I'm just asking, since Manhattan, particularly our area, has that kind of building, an already existing building. It's either occupied by residents, businesses, or community facilities. Their board decides they want to address their position in the floodplain. Just give me an idea of what it is that they do. How do they go forward?
So it depends what exactly exists within the floodplain, because if in particular there is habitable spaces below the design flood elevation, say on the ground floor, and they want to relocate those, it gives them options to do that. Now, specifically how they would be able to do that within a certain building context, I'm not sure, because that depends on the exact building itself. But it's possible it would be they would be allowed to add height to their building where they've taken it away from the ground floor, on the basis that that ground floor will be presumed to flood within the predicted design elevation. So the main, I guess, objective is to get habitable spaces out of the floodplain first and foremost for existing buildings. The second thing is it encourages the dry or wet floodproofing of spaces that are also within the floodplain. So say, for instance, the building you're talking about, it doesn't actually have any habitable residents below the flood elevation. It has, say a store or something like that. It allows or encourages certain wet floodproofing, for instance, where, say, that space would be designed to flood. So you can put different things within a wet flood area, such as parking or storage and things like that. But it specifically tries to ensure that those spaces are either designed to flood. It also encourages dry floodproofing, which is more cumbersome to do. But basically that involves completely insulating the outside of the building to ensure that water is not designed to come in. So that relates to seals and foundations and things like that. But that doesn't allow for, as far as I understand, habitable spaces to be under the design flood elevation. So there's, a few mechanisms there for existing buildings, which mechanism a specific building may choose to use will obviously depend upon its financial ability to do that. and how it's able to sort of compensate for that within the provisions, within the mechanisms that the zoning is allowing them to do that.
Okay, so I got that. So there are some alternatives. To put things on top of a building that were originally on the first floor, however, there are many buildings whose foundation can support additional height and weight. So that would be something that might be eliminated. I know the hospital is one, the Hospital for Special Surgery is one such incident that you can't put any more stories on top of it. The foundation won't support it. For an individual building to deal with this, does the agency walk them through this? Is there any way to get funding for this or any kind of supplement to a building or an institution taking such a project on? Where do they get their guidance? Do they have to always hire their private engineers? Does the city help with this? Is there city funding or partial funding available for any of this?
So that is the sort of the specific sorts of questions I would be happy to get back to you on, because I don't know the specifics of that. There is different types of initiatives that are available to different owners to assist with the financial component of this. As to the advice part of it, I mean, everyone has to go through the Department of Buildings. The text amendment, to build things and to change things. The text amendment would promote them working with the Department of Buildings and their own architects and engineers and consultants to try and solve the specific issues they're trying to resolve within an increased flexibility framework. I mean, that's the extent to what I can comment on that. The financial stuff is a little beyond me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, well, I thank you for that. It's helpful, but I think those kinds of parameters ought to be made known, because if you want to encourage buildings to do this, they have to know that they can financially. Otherwise, as is most people just let it be until there's the next disaster. There's going to be very little impetus to take this on and be aggressive for an individual institution in a building that has already been built. In other words, it's in existence, to do something as monumental as this without knowing the available resources, both professional and financial, to them in order to take this on and to encourage them to do such a thing prior to the next disaster. So that's all I would say, is to maybe include that kind of information in your next presentation or in your guidelines. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Scott, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. But you have an opportunity now. Is there anything you'd like to say before you leave?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate everyone's time and comments. And I mean, again, this is on public review, so it is on public review to try and get comments out of this. So please use this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Scott. And now I turn it over to Tricia. The rest is yours, Tricia.
Thanks, Barry. So we're going to move the agenda to the next item, which is a presentation. And I'm just looking for our speaker. Oh, Michelle, thank you. Sorry, Michelle. Michelle, go ahead, please, and from the Asia Society for Park Avenue.
Wonderful. Well, first, I'd like to, I think my colleague Jennifer from the New York Parks Department is going to give the brief introduction first. Is that right? Elizabeth? No? Okay. Oh, yeah, there she is. I think you need to unmute her, actually.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I'll just briefly introduce this and then Michelle can share all the information with you. I'm the Senior Public Art Coordinator at NYC Parks. Our office is part of the Art and Antiquities Division at Parks. My job is to oversee permitting of temporary public art exhibitions in parks citywide. We're a small team of 2 people working in all 5 boroughs. I think the most recent exhibitions we've done in CB8 include the Joseph La Piana exhibition, which was the kind of tension sculptures, which was in early 2019. There was a piece at 70th and at 67th Street. And prior to that was Tony Craig in 2018. So tonight we're here to just share some information about a temporary public art exhibition that the Asia Society will be exhibiting as part of their triennial, which is on view now. This will be part of phase 2. We are looking for that to be installed in March. It'll be on view through June. Just some very quick details on the temporary public art program. Exhibitors are required to have general liability insurance for their exhibitions for the duration of the exhibition. For Park Avenue, because of the train tunnels underneath and the sensitivities of those train tunnels, we do require MTA Metro North engineer review, which we completed earlier this year just to ensure that weight loads will not cause any structural issues to the train tunnels underneath. So that's been taken care of to ensure safety all around. And then I will turn it over to Michelle to show you some visuals and explain a little bit more about the work and the artist and the triennial as well.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Tricia. And thank you to the community board for inviting me this evening to speak with you all. It's really an honor, and I thank you for your time. Just to introduce myself, my name is Michelle Young Maplethorpe. I'm the Vice President of Global Artistic Programs and the Museum Director at Asia Society. In addition to that, I'm the Artistic Director and Co-Curator of the inaugural Asia Society Triennial. This triennial, which Elizabeth mentioned, opened on October 27th, is the first initiative of its kind. And actually, sorry, let me get to the screen here. Okay, oopsie. Okay, hold on one second, sorry. So yes, so let me introduce you briefly to the Asia Society Triennial. The inaugural edition is called We Do Not Dream Alone, and it's the first initiative of its kind in the United States that champions the work by Asian and Asian American contemporary artists. We had initially planned to have the exhibition on view from June to August of 2020. From June to August of 2020. But because of the pandemic, we had to pivot, and so now instead of that more truncated schedule with a more citywide purview, we've consolidated most of the works at Asia Society, and it will run between 2 parts over 8 months from October 27th to June 27th, 2021. So this just kind of gives you a little bit of the metrics for the project. And then let's see, oops, how come this is not moving? So here you can see the venues that we're working with. As I mentioned, the primary core part of the exhibition is at Asia Society Museum. We are also planning to have the discrete installation that Elizabeth mentioned on the Park Avenue median. There's a collateral exhibition that's on view right now at the New York Historical Society called Dreaming Together, that will be on view through July. And then as part of our part 1 edition, we will have a presentation in Times Square for the month of January that will be installed as part of the Midnight Moment program that is presented by Times Square Arts. So for the month of January, one of our artists will be presented every evening in a panoramic presentation on the digital screens in Times Square. And then additionally, we have a performance element to the project, and that is going to be across the city, permitting, health permitting. And one of the venues will be David Geffen Hall. We'll have a 1-day installation there. So some of the themes that we're working with for this inaugural triennial are democracy and freedom, borders and identity, environment and climate change, and gender and agency. So here is a rendering of the sculpture that we're planning to install on Park Avenue median. It's called Eternity Male Figure Statue of Venus Genetrix, and it will be presented as a public outdoor sculpture in front of Asia Society's building at 70th Street in the Park Avenue median. And the outdoor component of this will be realized in conjunction with the Fund for Park Avenue under the auspices of the New York City Parks and Art in the Parks program. And so this outdoor sculpture will be accompanied by a companion of indoor sculptural additions, which are actually on view right now at Asia Society. I welcome you to come see them in person if you're curious to get a better sense of the works. What this incorporates is actually very specific to Asia Society. We had commissioned the contemporary Chinese artist Xu Zhen to create these. And so the upper figure is an inverted replica of an 11th century Cambodian figure from the Rockefeller collection, part of our esteemed traditional collection of Asian art. And the bottom figure is a 2nd century Romanesque figure from a replica figure of a female form from the Getty collection. And so, you know, the dialectic between these objects and the multiplicity refer to issues in contemporary art relating to connoisseurship, this kind of class of civilizations between East and West, about, you know, collecting practices in the United States, thinking about gender, male and female, thinking about with contemporary artists, you know, kind of this idea of what is unique and what is kind of an endlessly replicated way of working, or kind of thinking conceptually, or thinking of the craft of working. And so thinking about cultural appropriations, many of these kinds of issues are all embedded in the ideas behind this work. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of a background about the artist, Xu Zhen was born in 1977 in Shanghai, China, and he currently lives in Shanghai. And he's very naughty, and his work is quite provocative. You know, it's multimedia, sculpture, painting, installation, and he talks about, in many of his works, the socio-political taboos in contemporary China, and also thinking about the relationship of art and commerce in contemporary art and culture. And so, you know, he plays on this idea of the individual artist versus kind of an artist, you know, as a brand or as a corporation, and kind of thinking about the role that money and branding have in the success of contemporary artists. So these are just kind of an image of the two companion works together. But, you know, we're very excited to be partnering with New York Parks Department and, you know, with the neighborhood. This is just, you know, for your reference, a truncated list of our triennial supporters who have been working with us and have been supporting the project. And so, you know, that's just a quick overview of the exhibition. And I invite all of you to come see part 1. Our museum is open from Thursday through Sunday, and it's very safe. We have time ticketing, so we're very, you know, we're complying with the city and state regulations, and you can reserve a ticket ahead of time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, either about the larger project or about the commission project that we're proposing today. Thank you.
Michelle, can you just before we go into questions, can you just clarify when it would go up and how long it would be up, and then when it would come down?
Sure, apologies for that. So the outdoor component that I proposed to you will be on view from March for part 2. So it would be on view publicly from March 16th to June 27th, 2021. We are still working out the exact details of when the installation will happen. And perhaps, you know, we can get back to you on that if that is a concern, but it will be very shortly before the 16th.
Great, thanks. Unless I don't see any members of the public raising their hands, so then we'll go straight to the community board members. So it's Sherry, then Rita, then Michelle, then Alita.
Great.
Sherry, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Will, I still see her as muted.
One second. The one with her hand up is unmuted right now.
Oh, okay.
Sherry, you're also signed in twice, so maybe try that other device.
How's this?
Better.
Yeah, I don't know why my iPad isn't working. I have it on too. So my question was, especially the sculpture that's going to be on Park Avenue, as you described it, is quite controversial. So I'm wondering, were these designs submitted to somebody for review, or they just were chosen by the Asian Society, or did the Parks Department or anybody in anticipation of comments that we may be getting? I'm just curious, who has approved, or did you get approval from some agency other than the Asian Society to put these particular works of art up?
We have actually. I mean, this particular commission is not in itself controversial or provocative. I was referring to the artist's larger practice. I think there are certain series that he's worked on that are more provocative. I mean, I think in his usage of these two sculptures from the Asia Society collection and the Getty collection, I mean, they're quite universally regarded as benchmarks of connoisseurship and, you know, kind of the highest examples of their type. So he's just kind of having a conversation about, you know, aesthetics and people's perspective of what they consider, you know, beauty or, you know, their personal preferences. But I don't think that it's controversial in a way that would cause any problems. That being said, we did have it vetted through the New York Parks Department. It went through a review and it went through, and Elizabeth, if you want to speak to that, you are welcome to jump in.
Yeah, so typically for projects on Park Avenue, they are first shared with the Fund for Park Avenue, who maintains the plantings along the malls. So we share it with them. They have a sculpture committee, and they will ultimately determine which proposals to advance. Parks' review is generally in terms of safety, structural stability, that they're going to comply with our requirements in terms of you know, the MTA's requirements, that they'll have insurance and things like that. Art is very subjective. You know, we didn't really have any concerns about this sculpture when it was brought to us. But if there are any concerns about the artwork, you know, they ultimately do come to the Parks Department, would respond to those.
Great. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Rita, Michelle, then Alita.
Hi, I just want to thank you for what you do, which is bringing art to the masses who don't go into galleries. But I do have one question regarding this particular sculpture. What about wind? Only because of the position of, you know, of high, and the legs are narrow. Has this been tested for extreme winds?
Yes.
That question, and we did, that's part of the review with the MTA Metro North engineers. It's attached to a base which is engineered to prevent overturning and to factor in for the wind loads. The engineers at the MTA are very familiar with the wind conditions on the malls. So we've properly you know, made sure that it's going to be stable and that we don't have any issues. I think we've done quite well on Park Avenue with other sculptures. We haven't had any artworks toppling over or crashing through the train tunnel alternately.
Thank you very much.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, my concerns were along those lines too, because the aesthetic of it is, that's very subjective, so I'm not going to address that. But what is the overall height of this, including that very high base? I didn't catch it off your initial slide.
The overall height is 149. It's just over 12 feet.
How much is that? What's the height of the base alone?
The height of the base is, let's see. I'm just trying to do my math. Hold on one second. It's about 3.5 feet, I would say.
Okay. The reason I ask is we have faced this before. I assume that the mounting and all that has been approved by the MTA, how this is down into the earth and all that. I assume all that is done. The materials are what? Is this cast?
It's bronze.
Cast? Yeah.
Yes.
Cast bronze.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the internal steel armature, and then the base is concrete. So it's very stable. We've done all of our due diligence.
So that's a concrete base. Here's why I'm asking. A sculpture came before us a while back that I don't remember the artist, but what it was is it had components which were very inviting for teenagers to climb on. I don't mention little children because they're usually accompanied, but you know, for teenagers at night to climb on, etc. And the height of the base here, 3.5 feet, seems to be very inviting to me. For somebody to climb on, you know, a kid to climb on, reach up to the top. I noticed that the sculptures that you have in your interior are on a much lower base, which is not as inviting. And I'm wondering if that could be a consideration here. I mean, are you feeling, or is the artist feeling that that 3.5 foot base is critical to his sculpture, or is it just considered a mounting that was in some way arbitrary? So that would be the first question. The second question is, I'll just throw them all so you can answer them in one. Are there any guards? And is there any commercialization of this? I know the Goodman Gallery is his representative, and so they're listed, and you know, and their interest, of course, is in the promotion of this artist, which will be mutually beneficial to the artist and the gallery going forward in terms of selling his work. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the commercialization, and also if you can address the climbing concerns. And I think, and that's really it, and a guard.
Sure.
That's the climbing, if you like. Just we've been exhibiting sculpture of all kinds on Park Avenue for probably 20 years, maybe longer. We haven't encountered any issues yet with anyone climbing. If that is a concern, we do also have no climbing signs that parks can provide, explicitly saying no climbing sculpture. But I think I might recall the piece that you're referring to, which was a Tony Craig piece, and we didn't hear any reports of anyone trying to climb it.
Well, you know, they don't all lend to that kind of thing. That one was a horizontal with bars and everything. It was particularly inviting. This one is more inviting for climbing on the base, for taking pictures, for, you know, if it isn't an integral part of the artwork, I just wonder if you can take that comment back, and maybe others would see it more appropriate to put it on a lower base, which wouldn't be so inviting. I don't imagine you have guards round the clock, but do you have any, you know, cameras or security cameras or anything like that?
Well, we will have a guard during business hours that is stationed right at the front, just partially for, you know, security and temperature, you know, the whole COVID protocol, and they are stationed right at the front door. And so they have a view of the sculpture. So at least during that part, there is somebody that has visual supervision on that. In terms of the base, you know, it was partially the artist's intent and their desire to have that scale, just for the aesthetics of the piece, but there were also structural concerns. And, I think that one of your colleagues had addressed that, the safety issue in terms of wind. And so having that base, we calibrated it for the safety and the structural soundness of the work. And so it does need to be that height for both aesthetic and safety reasons. And in terms of the commercial element, Asia Society is a completely nonprofit organization. We do not collaborate with galleries for the sale or promotion of artists' work for that purpose. So, what artists, we can't control what artists and their galleries do outside, but for the purposes of our exhibition, it's a completely scholarly exhibition. We're not involved with Marian Goodman. And so there is no commercial aspect of this whatsoever. So I hope that answers your questions.
It certainly did. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate your time. Oh, is there?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Michelle, if you can give us a few more minutes, we'll go quick through the rest of the questions. There's a couple more board members who have questions.
Okay, sure. I do have an appointment at 8, another with my trustee, but if I can answer 2 more questions, if that is.
Okay, we'll go to Alita and then Irma. I'm sorry, Marco, if you want, you can send me the question. We can send it to
You know what? I just wanted to say thank you to the museum for bringing some sense of beauty and normalcy, which we all crave so much. So I don't have a question. I just really wanted to express gratitude.
Okay.
I appreciate that so much. And I do hope that all of you will come visit. And I apologize for my time. I thought we would be finished by now. And one of our trustees had asked me to do something. So if we do run out of time after this next question, I'd be happy to answer any subsequent questions. Ms. Shimamura can send them to me, or, we can communicate afterwards. I'm happy to address anything.
That's great. We'll do Irma and then we'll let you know. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for the presentation as well. It's great, and I'm just one of the happy ones. I'm looking forward to going to the Asia Society and seeing the triennial. I actually have a time ticket for next weekend, the 19th. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I think the sculpture is great, and I promise not to climb on it. Thank you.
Good for you.
Thank you. We'll be looking out for you to make sure you keep your promise. But please, if you do come, please ask for me. I would love to meet you. And, if there's a possibility, we'll do that.
Okay, definitely, I will. Thank you.
Elizabeth, and thank you, Michelle. Can I just ask you a question, Elizabeth? Are you looking for a board resolution to support of this or no?
It's just informational because it is very temporary. It's only 3 months, about 3 months. For any of our temporary public art exhibitions, because they are temporary, we primarily come as an advisory.
Great. And Michelle, please feel free to leave. I know that you have another appointment, but Marco, if your question has to do with the Parks Department, they are here. So can we unmute Marco just in case?
Thank you again. Take good care, everybody.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to say is thank you for the presentation, and I support that. Thank you.
Okay. Our pleasure.
Yeah, if I could, and I don't know, I want to step away as chair and just really quickly say how wonderful it is to see art on Park Avenue again. It's really, really nice to see it again. And I honestly thought that everything that she was saying about speaking to gender and classics and the conflict between the two and all of these things were just really spot on. So that's not as chair, but as a perspective, I thought it's wonderful to see it. So I'm so excited to.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your support. It's been a challenging year for public art. Normally in a normal year, we'd have probably somewhere between 50 and 60 exhibitions, new exhibitions per year. This year it's been 20. So we are thankful for partners like Asia Society who are still able to make their exhibitions happen, even if it's on a different timeline, just to get art that's out, for the people. And inherently public art is great for social distancing.
Elizabeth, can I just clarify your role at the Parks Department? Because I think I want to talk to you about something else, not tonight, but what is your title at the Parks Department?
It's Senior Public Art Coordinator.
Great. And can you give us your email address?
Yeah, is that best from, I think Will has it. But yeah, he has it.
I do.
Okay, cool.
Follow up with you, but
Yeah,
thank
feel
you. Wonderful.
anytime you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Will do. So exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to hear now from Wes Hamilton.
Barry, before
Yes.
we request, can I just flag for you that I see that Mubin is here, I think, and Stacy Pappas is here. Two people who I just, after Wes gets done, I would love to see if they have any reports from us, because Stacy is our new executive director of the Friends of the East River Esplanade, and Mubin is our representative from Muslim Volunteers for New York. So just wanted to flag those two people, and if they're around, I see at least Stacy, and I think Mubin is here as well. If they're around, just please stick around afterwards.
Very fine.
Thanks.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I can't hear myself. But, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Welcome, everyone. I'm Wesley Hamilton. I'm the Parks Manager of New York City Parks Department. And I appreciate everyone coming out tonight again to the Zoom meeting. And I just have a few quick brief updates, but I am pleased to give us some new information, some good information. Not necessarily artwork, but it's definitely going to be music, especially to children's ears. I can tell you that Carl Schurz Playground has now been completed and is open to the public, and it's been receiving very good reviews. So yes, thank you for the claps. I wish it was for me, but I really didn't do it. But we are happy and pleased to have that area open and to the public. Also, we'd like to note that the pathway on the Esplanade at 76 to 78 has been restored. There is some more work to be done with that. It would be done with the phase work, but it is safe. The pathway is open and it is completely usable to the public. So anyone who uses that area in the past, or if you haven't used it, we encourage them to go by there and walk that. It really it was very frustrating to have that path blocked for many people, but now you can go from 60th Street all the way up to John Finley, all the way up to I believe 117th on the Esplanade. So we're pleased with that progress. 24 Sycamore Park's in progress. The contractor's still working there. St. Catherine's is still under design. Honey Locust is awaiting bids. Another update that I'm happy to give, not on the capital project, but everyone may remember at John Jay, we've had terrible issues for the last 2 years with flooding, with the spray showers at the playground. We believe we have that issue resolved now. It took a great deal of effort from everyone. We hired a contractor last year with a very large vacuum truck. You may see the trucks occasionally working on storm sewers and stuff throughout the city, blocking traffic, and it's basically a vacuum truck. We did that last year, and we were unsuccessful. This year, the Parks Department rented a truck and let our plumbers do the work, and we got schematics from our capital team to get a better understanding of our drainage. And our staff went in there, and our plumbers went in there, and instead of last season we took out 2 truckloads, this time we took out 3 truckloads of sand from our drains and did some repair work into the subsurface. And the plumbers report that they had it open, wide open, spray showers, as much water volume as they could, and they did not flood. So we're very pleased with that. So next summer we're expecting the spray showers to be fully operational in that park, which is a relief to many people. I'd like to mention, as we have some volunteers on here tonight, but that we had I think some very successful It's My Park Day projects going on throughout the districts and various parks. I'm not going to go into and we would like to encourage ones coming up probably next spring. But thank you to everyone who participated, and we truly appreciate all their efforts and hard work. As far as permits and events in the parks, it's pretty much the same as it was last month. Currently, right now, I hope it can stay like that as our COVID numbers are not going the direction we want them to. But currently, right now, we are permitting small events under 50 people and events that wouldn't draw a crowd. So specifically, we're talking like private parties, birthday parties of that nature. First Amendment speech. We probably won't be caroling or anything of that nature, but we are doing Christmas tree lightings in locations. And then of course our youth sports, we're permitting youth sports in our parks. The other last thing I'd like to mention is the Parks Department is open to hearing suggestions for parks renaming. I know that's been some topics that's come up politically and due to recent events. We've already had some areas of parks that's been renamed. The agency is open to hearing.
Wes, you're breaking up.
I'd be happy to word on that, but if people have any suggestions for any park areas, I know that I believe that was a concern and an issue, a topic at one of our community board meetings. Specifically, I'm thinking like 86th Street Plaza, or how do we do something similar to that, more permanent? This may be an avenue to that, not necessarily trying to say it's a memorial, but again, it's a naming of parks or naming of certain areas of the parks. And some of them have been done as memorials to some of the Black Lives Matters in some of our parks. So we're open to hearing more suggestions. It doesn't have to be that issue is not, but whatever you suggest, we're open to hearing it. And there is a format for that to happen if you're interested. And that's all I've got for tonight, unless anybody's got any questions for me.
Wes, getting back, Wes?
Yes.
The naming of sections of the park, you say there's a form for that?
I believe there's a form, yes. I got to get a little bit more details and information about it. They just brought it up in one of my meetings recently, and but I believe they did sit on a form, and I'll have to dig it up and I'll get that out to you guys. But
thank you.
Suggestions, and we'll work it through. Look.
Rita and then Michelle.
Good evening, Rita.
Hi, like many New Yorkers, I was out celebrating this weekend and took a walk down the Esplanade only to find a motorcycle going north. And I wondered if you had any rules or regulations. It seemed very strange of whether it's electric bikes or electric mopeds or motorcycles. It was a small motorcycle, but it was a motorcycle.
Yes, I believe there's rules for motorized vehicles on the Esplanade. We do report it to our Parks Enforcement, and NYPD is able to enforce that as well. However, realistically, there's a lot of challenges especially with electric bikes, electric scooters, electric skateboards, you name it. And the fact NYPD, but it is brought to the attention, and we have seen an uptick in that as well. And I've observed it as well, but we report it to our Parks Enforcement patrols, and they try to watch for it, and NYPD can also enforce that as well.
And who is responsible for taking care of the glass or whatever it is at the end of John Finley Walk? Because there were spray painted in the center part 3 initials, very large.
I lost part I couldn't hear part of it. My computer froze up there, but I heard who's responsible for cleaning up glass. And then I also heard some spray paint. Is that it?
Who's responsible?
And what was the location? I mean, it sounds like it's parks. I haven't observed it myself, but where was the location? I'll have our guys take a look.
Right in the middle, right on the glass overlooking the FDR Drive.
John Finley Walk.
John Finley, thank you. And right in the middle.
So is it on the pedestrian
Yeah.
bridge? Is that what you're referring? 81st
Street.
Looking down, you know,
Okay.
right when you're at 81st. And
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. We've cleaned it before. It depends on where it's at as well. I mean, if it's from the inside, which usually it is, then parks can take care of it. Obviously, you know, I can't put a bucket truck on the outside of the bridge. But I didn't see it today. But is it new? It must be really new. And you're saying it's on the glass?
On the glass, three very large initials.
Is it, if it's scratched, it may be challenged, but if it's spray paint, we can try to get that off, and we'll take a look at that.
In black and green.
Okay, we'll look into that.
Thank you. And last but not least is just a sound out to Mubin and the Muslim women of New York, from somebody who lives across the street from Rupert Park. I want to thank you for the devotion that you have toward the park. You have literally made a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Unfortunately, we need to do more, but you have done more than anybody, and I can't thank you enough.
Great. Can we go to Michelle?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say that your screen froze, and it froze through the whole part where you were describing which parks you were thinking might be wanting name changes. And also there's a little blurb over your screen that says that you're lacking bandwidth. So that's probably why it's freezing. If that's a problem, I'd like to recommend the Google Mesh system, if that could be of help to you. But anyway, can you just repeat that part, because I didn't hear it.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me explain that what I'm doing is I'm basically using my cell phone, my work cell phone, for a camera. And I'm actually looking at my computer up here, which is my personal computer because I'm at home. So Google is not really an option for that, unfortunately. But hopefully you can hear me now. I didn't mention any specific parks. I was just simply saying that it can be a whole park, or it can be an area of a park. One of the areas I believe that came up in the past was 86th Street Plaza. And I'm just using that as an example. I'm not,
But it came up for what reason? It has no name, somebody proposing a name? Is that what you mean?
No, somebody had asked about trying to do a memorial or something similar to like what has been going on at 87th Street Plaza. So, what I'm saying is you could actually name a certain area. You could suggest the name of a certain area or a certain location of a park. And I was using 86th Street Plaza as an example. And hopefully I didn't freeze at that time. It looks like I'm freezing as well. So,
yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have Craig and then Mubin.
Hi, Craig.
I just want to thank you and Parks Department for the speed in which you were able to complete the repairs at 76th Street on the Esplanade and deal with the sinkhole. I was down there a few days ago and very much appreciated being able to have that connection to points south of 76th Street. And given how warm it was and how crowded the Esplanade was, I think it was very much appreciated by our community. So I just want to commend Parks.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there very quickly before Mubin. I'm very appreciative, Wes, between the Esplanade and Carl Schurz and John Jay flooding, which I won't completely let you off the hook for until next summer when I see it for myself that it doesn't flood. But all of that is just so impressive. And I also want to say that I saw your team out on sometime in the last, I can't remember, 72 hours planting trees in our neighborhood. I saw at least 4 trees planted between 72nd Street and 76th Street in areas. So I thought that that was great. You guys are really working hard and we just really appreciate it. Before I wanted to ask one thing and then we'll go to moving. I also wanted to ask if you had any plans to clean the sandbox at John Jay or just all of our sandboxes in general before the winter sets in. Because of the weird, strange, warm weather, kids are still playing out there. And I've just been noticing that like with the trees and everything else like that blowing, with the leaves falling, it's just getting like the ratio of sand to leaves is shifting towards leaves. So I'm wondering if you guys have any plans to do one more sweep or one more rake before the winter.
Yes, we'll constantly monitor that. I mean, right now the leaves are probably, we just passed probably peak. They were really beautiful, but now they're starting to all fall down. And you know, our crews will be cleaning. There'll still be plenty more leaves to do at John Jay. We've got the tub to do with the pool, so as well.
I think
we'll try and usually replenish in the thing. Did you hear me okay?
No.
No.
I actually think it might be my signal because where I'm at. Can you hear me now? So I anticipate we'll be cleaning again the leaves. We have to do the tubs at John Jay and the pool. And you know, it's challenging right now to do it every day because the leaves are falling quicker than we can rake them up. But we will clean it again, yes.
Thank you.
So actually I see, so I guess moving, I know you're going to speak, but I was actually thinking that you would speak right after this. So I'm going to go to Sandrea next, just in case she has a question for Wes.
Hi, greetings all. I'm Sandra I. Coleman. I'm a member of the community board and a member in the community, of course. I would be interested in obtaining the form for dedicating an area of Carl Schutz Park for Black Lives Matter, maybe a memorial section of the area where we assemble at. As one of the organizers, it would be great to dedicate that area of the park that we are at. And I'm certain the group of attendees would like to see that, especially since we have been attending nonstop for over 160 plus days since June 2nd, no matter what the weather is like. So if it's possible, I can obtain the form through one of the co-chairs, if they can get it and forward it to me via email, and we can start the process to see if it can happen or not. So, but I'm definitely interested in it, and I'm going to bring that information back to the group tomorrow. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, will do.
Great. Mubin?
Hi, Tricia. Thank you very much. I just again wanted to thank CB8 for these very informative monthly sessions. So much about maintaining better New York City park spaces and green spaces. So thank you for that. I actually just wanted to give a shout out to Rita. Thank you so much for your very kind comments. They mean a great deal to us. I wish all the neighbors could be as involved as you, but having neighbors like you has really improved community engagement. We like how neighbors are really getting invested in that park. We have a long ways to go. So I wanted to ask you, Tricia, I don't know, we had talked in the last meeting about possibly having a much bigger global meeting with all the constituents involved. You and Barry had said that maybe you might take lead in orchestrating that. Just wanted to know what the status on that was. And I also wanted to thank Wes. We've done 2 cleanup events since the parks opened, one in August and one in October. And we were able to do the bulk of the planting for the fall, even though we only had 25 volunteers. So thank you so much, Wes, for all the support that you and PFP provided. But one of the big concerns I have for the immediate needs is the irrigation in Rupert Park. I know it's been an age-old problem, but can we figure out a way to at least get either, maybe Wes, if you can advise us whether we can invest in a hose that runs all the length from the shed down to the green spaces up front. At least we can look into if there's something we can do to working with our members and neighbors, etc., to raise money for that, because I have been starting to go to John Jay Park a whole lot more because they have a lot more resources, and I see some of the improvements in that park versus ours. So just wondered if you could address that. So one, when can we have that more global meeting? So as Rita said, we really need to take this dialogue further. And two, to see if something can be done in the immediate near term, because really is we're relying on Mother Nature to maintain that park as far as water is concerned. And when we do go, we fill up bottles of water and pour water wherever we feel there is a need. But I think there has to be more efficient system, minimally a hose.
Yes, let me just, so I'm Mubi, and I'm sorry if I'm late on this. But Barry, we can talk about putting Muslim Volunteers or Rupert Park on the agenda for next month, if that makes sense to you to talk about this. Or the alternative, or maybe we do both, is that I've been thinking about this, and this kind of directly goes into Stacy, but I've been thinking about maybe having a convening of all of our conservancies and groups that are taking care of our parks and open spaces, just to get everybody together and check in with them. So maybe we can do both of those, and that may serve different purposes, but could be beneficial just to and do a status.
Tricia, let's address that in the next coming day. Certainly by the full board meeting, we may have something to report.
Okay, great. And then I see Rita has her hand up, and then thank you, Mubin. And then Mubin, we'll follow up to Wes. If you could follow up about the irrigation hose issue, that would be great.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you, Tricia, Billy, and all the other members of Community Board 8 who came to Rupert Park. I consider you the younger. I'm good with a broom. You're obviously good with a spade. So thank you very much. And I want you to know it's really appreciated.
I cleaned up 2 dead rats from that day.
Oh boy.
It was
It's funny, we had the exterminator 2 days in a row. Wes was kind enough to pamper us, and we did get the exterminator in twice that week. I guess it's that problem is it's a much greater problem than we expected, and I think the pandemic didn't help.
Yeah, happy to do it. I'll pick up rats anytime for you, maybe. No problem. Okay, and then I wanted everybody just to give you a quick introduction of Stacy Pappas. She's our new executive director of Friends of the East River Esplanade. And Stacy, in the future, I'd love to have, like I said, you on the agenda and talk about the work that you guys are doing. But if I wanted to give you just a few minutes to introduce yourself and say hi to everybody.
Great. Hi. Thank you so much, Tricia. This was actually such a nice surprise because I worked with Michelle Yun at MoMA many, many years ago and haven't seen her since. So when her face popped up, I kind of was like, whoa, that's who we're talking to tonight. So that was really great. And was texting with Wes earlier today, and now I get to see his face. So that's exciting. And Tricia, I feel like we're old friends because we spent, a morning cleaning up some garbage. So, so thanks everybody. I think next time or next couple of times, we'll have some updates and a presentation for you guys to look at. I really liked hearing what you had to say. You guys are really passionate about the community and really passionate about what's going on in your neighborhood. And you asked really good questions tonight. So I got a chance to get to know all of you a little bit more. It's only my 4th week as executive director of Esplanade Friends. So I have a lot to learn and a lot to take in. So I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you a bit more.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy, and welcome.
Okay. Tricia, you got the last word.
Barry, please take us away.
Want to wish everyone a good, sound, safe, healthy, good night, good luck, and we'll see you next month. Thank you for joining us. We greatly appreciate your participation. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, Wes. Good night, all.
Good night, everyone. Good to see you.